Hey, good day everybody. This is Joe. Hey, welcome to a beautiful Wednesday morning. And well, a couple days ago I did some 4x5 reversal prints. You might remember this video where I did these prints right here. Yeah, I like the 4x5 format. I have this little Intrepid camera with a Fujinon lens. It's a nice little lightweight package, but what I really want to do is I'd like to make these prints in the 8x10 size. And the challenge is, I don't really have an 8x10 camera, a modern view camera. I have a homemade sliding box camera, and I don't have a real 8x10 large format lens with a shutter. In order to get my 8x10 camera out, you gotta have a tripod. There's the homemade tripod. Let's go get the camera. Alright, there is the homemade 8x10 sliding box camera. Let's take a look at it, shall we? This is the rear of the camera. There's a baseboard made of plywood. The front of the camera is fixed stationary to the baseboard, like that, and then the back of the camera slides in and out from the front of the camera like that for focusing. This whole camera is made from scrap wood. The heart of the camera is actually made of black foam core board, and the outer case of the camera is really just laminated countertop material, this wood laminate, and I got some of these little edge pieces just to protect it. This is scrap wood. So I have a ground glass view screen. It's made out of a magnifying glass that you get at the office supply store. It has a Fresnel lens on the back side here, and there is a smooth side on the front side that I've ground down with a random orbital sander to make a ground glass view screen. Now the lens is recessed into the front of the camera, and I have two slots up here. The front slot is the shutter. It's a pull shutter, and the back slot is room for f-stop apertures depending on what kind of lens you're using. This particular lens right here is a close-up lens that goes on to a 35mm film camera lens. Let's see if I can focus. Of course, an upside down image. There's your skyline, a tree line up there, and you just basically focus in and out like that. Now, I've used different lenses in this camera over the years. I have this little metal bracket with an arrow pointing from the back, and I put a little focusing scale with tape, just some Sharpie marker, and put a piece of tape on it to protect it. And that was from a previous lens design. And then the current lens I'm using, I had to add 23mm to whatever this number is. Instead of redoing the whole scale, I just put a little tag there. But this was, the whole purpose of this was to be able to figure out my f-stop. You focus on your subject, you read and calculate the focus distance, and then you would put an aperture into the top of the camera of a certain diameter, and dividing the focal length by the aperture tells you the actual true f-stop of the lens. But we're not going to use this lens today. Let me pull it out here. This is a real simple bracket made from black foam core board and a little bit of scrap wood and gaffer's tape that holds this close-up lens in place. I have a different lens in mind to put in the camera. Okay, so the thing about these single element meniscus lenses is you can put aperture stops in front of them or behind them. The lens is sitting in the front portion of the camera, and then you have the slot right in front of that you can put the aperture plates in front of, like that. And I have a whole stack of these aperture plates of different sizes. They range from a small size of 3mm all the way up to 34mm in size. I had a whole pack of them. And of course the plates are labeled according to their diameter, and when you divide that into the focal length of the camera, you get the true working f-stop. Now, I created a laminated chart for this where this is the measured focal length on the camera, and this would be the size of aperture plate you would need to make a corresponding f-stop here. And that only is applicable with this particular lens. Now, because this is a single element meniscus lens, it has a lot of off-axis aberration, out of focus if you use it wide open. The thing is, with the direct positive reversal process I'm doing, I need a lot of light because it's actually effectively the film speed of the paper becomes less than ISO 1. So if I want to do reasonable exposure times, I'm going to have to get a pretty bright aperture. And that gets to the problem of what kind of a lens can I use, because I don't really have a real large format lens. And 8x10 lenses for 8x10 cameras aren't necessarily all that fast. The Fujinon lens, the 135 that I'm using for my 4x5 camera, its maximum aperture is 5.6. So I was thinking about this yesterday. What am I going to use as an alternative, a little brighter lens than this and something sharper from edge to edge? And I remembered I bought this lens a few years ago at Kurt's Camera in Albuquerque before they closed down. This is a Fujinon Xerox machine lens. It's a barrel lens, does not have any aperture stops, and the problem with this lens is if you tried to put a Waterhouse stop in front of it or behind it, it'll just vignette the image. It would need to have a slot cut in the middle of it between the lens elements to be able to use f-stops. I had bought this with the hopes of being able to use it for this 8x10 camera with paper negatives, but the problem I had was it was too fast. This is an f4.5 lens. This is the fastest large format lens I have, as it turns out. And because it's a Xerox machine lens, it'll focus flat from corner to corner. It is a focal length of 240 millimeters, 24 centimeters, about right for 8x10. When I tried to use it on paper negatives, which are a lot faster, the paper negatives I use, the same paper, in fact, that I'm using for this reversal process, that's less than ISO 1, I'm rating that paper at ISO 12. In bright daylight scenic photography, it means this lens, I would need a shutter speed less than a 1 second shutter speed. I can't accurately time a lens cap kind of shutter less than 1 second. I did, however, make this mechanical shutter a few years ago that goes on the front of the box. I probably showed you this on a video years ago. The problem with this particular shutter, it's a rotating spring-loaded shutter. It's only like from about a 1/6 of a second to about an 1/8 of a second. It's not really that accurate, and it's hard for me to know exactly what the timing is on it. And for some of the kinds of photography I was doing, like with Harman direct positive paper, I need an accurate shutter speed. The exposure latitude is pretty narrow. Okay, having said all that, I'm hoping I can run this lens wide open, and in daylight with that super slow direct positive reversal process, I think I'll get shutter speeds of a couple seconds maybe, in bright sunlight, which is perfect, right? I can maybe use a seated portrait with a head brace, a person sitting really still, and it's not going to be super long exposure. Okay, so I had made a bracket for this Fujinon lens to fit into my 4x5 speed graphic, and it was this minus this piece and that piece, and it had this little flange here, and it fit onto my speed graphic. So yesterday evening and this morning I took this bracket and modified it. I took the front flange off, and I had to add this piece to mount into this box camera. It sort of is the same idea as this here. It sits in there, and there's two bolts that attach inside the big camera. This is going to sit actually like that. And I had to add an extension piece so it'll hold in there. So this is the front of the bracket, and the front of the lens is right there. So I'm going to try to carefully fit this in here. It fit in here earlier. There it goes. Boom, like that. Yeah. So there it is. So I'm going to go fit this into the camera now. It's actually pretty good. Corner to corner is not. It's really pretty darn good, actually. Focused in the middle here. And this is representative of how much additional focus range I have until this back goes all the way out to the edge of the baseboard. But I have pretty good range for close focusing. I'm gonna have to test the close focusing on this to see what it is. Okay, well, so I'm focused on my wooden pillar over there, and this is extended all the way out, and it looks like my focal distance is something on the order of about 2 feet, maybe just a little bit over 24 inches, which I think ought to be pretty good for a close-up portrait, you know. Not bad. You can see all the detail in there. I do have a few things to do here. I have a little bit of light coming in around the edge of the lens barrel that I have to cover up with the gaffer's tape. That was the reason why I had that front piece of plywood on the 4x5 speed graphic bracket. I got to cover this stuff up with gaffer's tape, but yeah, that basically will work. Well, okay, so I took the back half of the camera out, and you might be able to see that it's just the outer box is made of foam core board and gaffer's tape, and there's an inner box of wood that holds the back frame for the ground glass and the film holders. And this front part inserts into the front of the camera. So I have an inner box of foam core here, the outer box of foam core that's covered in the countertop laminate, and then the gap between the two is where the back half of the camera slides. So that gap forms a light trap, keeps the light from coming in. And then of course my lens is now mounted there. I put these cheap little foam molding things in just to protect the corners of the camera in case it gets dinged up. And it looks like it's done a pretty good job protecting it. Alright, so I've covered up completely this gap around the lens, and the lens is pushed up all the way to the front of the inside of the box. I can still read the words around the lens, so I know it's a 24 centimeter f4.5 lens, and I can always take out the gaffer's tape at some future date if I need to, but that's the beauty of gaffer's tape. You can take it on and off, and this stuff I use all the time for cameras. This is not an elegantly manufactured lens mount, but for experimental photography where you're constantly changing things, this is the way to do it. Well, of course, this wooden tripod was also an experiment. It was an experiment in making a lightweight wooden tripod, obviously, really a landscape tripod. There's no adjustable head on it. Can't really use this for portraits. It's really too tall also. So I need a tripod that's rugged, heavy enough for 4x5, but really is more ideally suited for seated portraits, and this is what I have. This is an old tripod called a Bruno's pneumatic tripod, and here is the made by Fox Products in the US. This is a pneumatic piston in the column of the tripod, and there's an adjustable plate here, so I can adjust the height of this tripod for a seated person, and it's nice and heavy. This tripod has extendable legs. It's aluminum, and the rectangular channels of the legs have wood inside of them here. Now, as far as the focusing scale that was on this side of this camera, I took off the sticker because I had this camera focused close to infinity, and the arrow is pointing to 240 millimeters, and it's a 24 centimeter lens, so I think this scale is going to be pretty accurate, so I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Okay, because I'm not going to be using Waterhouse stops, those external little plates with holes in them, for this Xerox lens, I'm going to have to do something with this slot here where they go into, because it's going to be a light leak or fog or something. So I have this little plate set up, so this just kind of goes in here and covers up the slot there, so hopefully no light gets in or not enough to fog the paper. And the paper is so slow, it shouldn't be an issue. So. The 8x10 sliding box camera is now on the Bruneau's pneumatic tripod, so it has a tilting head that tilts up one way, and as far as leveling it sideways, the other axis, you have to just adjust the legs. But in a studio setting where the ground is, or floor is pretty level, it shouldn't be a problem. So I have the chemistry port up in the 8x10 trays. Used paper developer. People were asking about what kind of developer I'm using. I'm using, what is it? Ilford Multigrade. I'm diluting it about 1 to 10, but this is from a container of used developer, so you know, if it doesn't get dark enough on the first developer, I'll just pour a little bit more multigrade in there and stir it up. A rinse of water, citric acid, again, it's the same batch I've been using for the 4x5s, and the same batch of peroxide. So I don't know when this peroxide is going to get exhausted. We may find out soon, because a 8x10 sheet is going to be 4 times the area of a 4x5. So we may exhaust it on the first test. We don't know. Got our 8x10 holder. I'm just going to put 1 sheet in, and we're going to use the standard Freestyle Photo Arista RC Grade 2 semi-matte finish that we've been using all the way up to now. This is our little subject, our little ceramic piggy. Hello, piggy. I got a little light, catch-all light on the ear there. So I'm going to do probably a reflected reading here, right off the body of him. And let's see what this comes out to be. 4 to 8 seconds. I'm going to do like 6-second exposure. A 6-second exposure, see what happens. Okay, I got to focus this thing, and I think I've already focused it, if nothing's moved. But there's his head right there, and I think it's pretty sharp right on his snout. Okay, I got the shutter closed. Take out the ground glass. Put in the A side of the film holder. Tighten down the thumb screws for the film holder. Going to set the ground glass off to the side here. So we're saying about a 6-second exposure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the dark slide. I'm going to hold it over the front here, and then wait for the camera to settle at 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. All right. Put the dark slide in. Wow. Holder. And we can go inside the darkroom and process it. I don't see the image coming up. Oh, there it is. I'm starting to see it. You can see the edge of the table. I don't know about this. I see the edge of the film holder, finally. Starting to see a little bit of the outline of the piggy. This is a lot longer flashing than I normally do, but I think you need to expose fully the residual silver halides. Yeah, this is definitely dark developer, used developer. All right, this is the second exposure. Hopefully my chemistry is not exhausted. I don't see it. Oh, there's something. There's the table on the upper corner. Let's see what we get here. The first one had a lot of streaks in it, and I think it was probably improper agitation from the peroxide solution. This one looks a lot better. Oh, that looks kind of cool. Actually, very cool. I do have one scratch. I like the look of this one, though. It's promising. I think it's pretty good. I have not selenium toned it yet. There is a scratch right in the lower right corner there, see? Gonna have to let it rinse, and then we'll selenium tone it and see how it looks. This is the picture. It's selenium toning. It's about almost 4 minutes into it, and starting to turn color a little bit. The background is starting to lighten up a little bit, like what I saw with the 4x5s when I did this, and I'm starting to get that nice color on the shadows. So just a comparison. The first print that came out real streaky, you can kind of see the difference in tone already. This was because of inadequate agitation, I think, in the peroxide and citric acid. Anyways, I'm going to let this go a little bit more and get a nice, good selenium tone on it. It does lighten up the background somewhat, which I really like. It increases the contrast. Rinsing the print, the final rinse. There we go. Face down, of course, so the fitting on the end of the hose won't scratch it. Well, I'm excited to see how this is going to come out once it's dried. I think it was pretty good. Second attempt at 8x10 direct positive reversal prints. I was pretty happy with the results of this, the second test. The first one I obviously didn't agitate it enough. Anyways, it's a pretty cool little picture. I think if I had to criticize it, well, obviously I have a little scratch here, and there's actually a tiny one here as well, a couple here, but the main compositional problem, of course, is this here. Umbrella pole is in the picture. I was pleased with the narrow depth of focus of the image and how the decorative tile on the wall of my courtyard is so widely out of focus. It was only maybe a couple feet behind it, but well, that's pretty wide open. f4.5 for an 8x10 image. So you can see I got his face pretty well in focus. His front right leg is, the back one is already out of focus by the time you get there. So you can also kind of see on the table here where the focus plane was. So anyways, I was pretty happy with it, and I was pleased with the way my sliding box camera conversion came out. Pretty much all set up now to do 8x10s in this reversal process, and that's exciting. And leave your comments down below. I'd like to hear from you. You guys stay creative and have yourselves, yes, a great day. Bye-bye.